So it's 6 o'clock. It looks like we do have a quorum present. Maybe we'll give it a couple more minutes to see if Evan or Jacques join us. Mary won't be here this evening. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
All right, well, I'd say we just waited a couple minutes, so I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is a special meeting of the Grand County Commission. Today, Tuesday, November 30th, it's 6:02 p.m. Present are Commission Administrator Chris Baird, Associate Administrator, Commission Administrator Mallory Nassau, and Clerk Auditor Quinn Hall, in addition to Grand County Commissioners Tricia Dean, Kevin Walker, Sarah Stock, Jacques Hadler, and myself, Gabriel Wojtek, Vice Chair, sitting in his chair for this particular meeting in the chair's absence. We'll just jump right to general business action items and discussion of the final map candidates of the redistricting, and I'll hand it over to Commissioner Walker. And if you wouldn't mind just starting out by sort of reminding everyone, including the public, sort of what the goals are for this particular meeting, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, thanks, Gabe. I think the goals for this meeting are to narrow things down to just a very small number of choices, maybe one, perhaps two or three maps if we can't come to a consensus, and but not make the official decision, have that wait until a week from now at our regular meeting. So that just gives the public and all of us another week or so to think about it before finalizing. At the previous meeting, we settled on 5 plans that we thought deserved a closer look, and then some additional variants on some of those plans, which I'll put up on my screen in a moment. And so I guess we can just start talking about the virtues of those plans. Maybe I should share my screen and get them in front of us first.
Please, thank you. And it's 6:04, and Commissioner Clapper has joined us as well. Go ahead and share your screen, Kevin. Thanks.
Okay, I gotta find the right, this one. Yep. Okay, so hopefully you can see the county redistricting site. And okay, I need to grab my glasses. Okay, so here's the county redistricting portal. At the top, there's this link that says draft plans, and that includes the 9 plans that we were calling semifinalists. And so to review, we have, there's a plan that was drawn by Sarah Stock, which she called the Contiguous Neighborhood Plans. That's been renamed to Variant 2. And then she had an update on that, which is the first one here. I also made an update on it, and we can discuss these more in a moment. So these 3 plans are kind of similar. There's a plan that Carter Pape submitted that we discussed last week. There's another map that Sarah submitted, which divides the outlying parts of the county, Castle Valley, Thompson, Green River area, into different districts rather than all the same district. And I think this is her original, renamed variant 2, and her update is this one. And then there's an update that I drew, which is this guy here. Courtney Kaiser submitted a plan, and which I think differs from a lot of these in that it divides Spanish Valley along into northern and southern parts rather than eastern and western parts. And then there's a final plan that I submitted. So my impression at our last meeting, it was these two plans of Sarah's that seemed to be the most interest to people, I think, because they use pretty clean lines, dividing things along, either Pack Creek or major roads, and still manage to achieve a pretty good population balance. So unless people have other ideas, and I don't see any members of the public here to comment, I was thinking we could focus on those, but I will pause just to see if anyone else has a different idea or. Okay, I'm not.
I really like the clean lines idea.
Okay, I think many people do place high value in clean lines, so I think it seems like that's going to be one of our main factors. I should say in general, just again in case people are watching this live or on tape, that there's a lot of different things you can try to accomplish with a district map, and it's impossible to kind of get an A+ on all of those. So we want equal population, we want clean lines, we want to not break up neighborhoods. We want to, when we are grouping areas together that aren't part of the same neighborhood, we want it to do it in a way that makes sense. We might take into account income and things like that. There's just so there's lots of ways of slicing up the population of Grand County, and one can assess a districting map from all those different points of view. And you're never, as I say, you're never going to be perfect on all those different yardsticks. So in saying that I think clean lines is good, I do think it's good, but I think there's lots of other things we can consider as well.
Sorry, Kevin, and to vocalize like the value of clean lines, we're talking about just sort of citizens being able to easily sort of self-identify which voting district they live in, and which say someone they know that's in a that lives in a different part of town, they can easily sort of identify with one another where each other's districts are, and it seems to there isn't any confusion over that type. I guess I'm just trying to sort of speak out loud.
I think that's, again, probably the most common complaint I've heard over the past several years about our existing districts are that it's just hard for people to figure out what district they're in. And our existing districts, actually, the lines aren't that crazy, but it's, one of them, like District 3, is disconnected into two pieces. So that does seem to be a common complaint that people make, or, just looking on the map if it looks squirrely. And I think when we start looking at specific maps, we can talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, I think, Gabe, you summed it up pretty well, why one might value that. I think also often, if by clean line you mean like dividing along a major road or something like that, that often also coincides with this goal of not splitting neighborhoods apart. Silence my phone. So maybe why don't we start with Sarah's revision of the plan that people seemed to like last time. So here it is, and we'll open it up in Districtor so that we can get more detailed information. So one of the things I think we should discuss and decide about tonight is how we divide up parts of the county outside of Spanish Valley. And by Spanish Valley, I mean, the big Spanish Valley going all the way up to Arches. So there's not a whole lot of people that live here, probably less than 5% of the county. And so it's certainly possible to put them all in the same district. That's what our current districts do, and that's what this plan does. But one could also imagine Thompson being in a different district from Castle Valley, for example. Castle Valley's, it's roughly 300 registered voters around here. I don't know the exact population number. Thompson is much smaller than that, and the Green River suburbs are much smaller still. So not a whole lot of people, but it does sometimes, when commissioners have to go frequently to Thompson, for example, then it can become a big burden. So the major dividing lines in this plan, we've got 500 West right here. We've got Highway 191 in this area. This is a combination of Cane Creek Boulevard, and then it goes to Pat Creek. But actually, if you look at these census blocks right here, they're all zero population. It's just commercial property. And so we equally well, I would advocate for changing it by just adding, this doesn't change the population balance at all, but it just makes it follow roads rather than Pat Creek in this area. So that's a change we might consider. These lines are kind of an unpopulated area, so this isn't so important here. We've got Mill Creek Drive going up to the Sand Flats Road. So again, pretty easy to understand. In Spanish Valley, undo that. Spanish Valley, it uses Pack Creek for a long way. And that's it's kind of a squiggly boundary, but I think that's really a rather excellent boundary, because there's no way to drive from here to here. So this side of the creek is definitely very distant, except for maybe the people who live right on the creek. I think that's a pretty logical place to split Spanish Valley, though Spanish Valley Drive or Highway 191 might also work. And then it switches to that. So the one place where I think this map might fall short is it does split up the Holyoke neighborhood, maybe not quite as much as the original version did. So this is kind of Sage Drive. So this, in some sense, this dividing line is a heavier, more heavily trafficked road. It's, Holyoke to Sage going out to 191. And I don't live in this area, but it does seem to me that people living on this side of Holyoke Lane, if we were ignoring everything else, we'd probably want to group them there. Now it's impossible. There's going to have to be split somewhere, and so maybe this is the best we can do. But we should at least acknowledge that.
Also, in the next few years, that the purple zone is probably going to have the most population growth in the whole area, right?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing it up. And I think Sarah deliberately in this version made the population of the purple zone low. So here the bar graph. So this purple area, District 5, it's got the most growth potential. So I do think it makes sense to give it the lowest population initially, because we expect it's going to catch up over the next 10 years. Similarly, this blue district is has also got a lot of Spanish Valley in it. In addition to this big subdivision near Powerhouse Lane, which at least there's a application in for, I think, a few hundred houses there. So, but both of these districts have large growth potential. So it's probably good that they're starting out on the low end in population. So I can't really think of so why wouldn't we just choose this map? So if we wanted to quibble with it, it does put all of the outlying parts of the county into one district, which is what we have now, but maybe that's not ideal, or at least we might want to think about other things. It has a split in Holyoke neighborhood, which probably splits Holyoke in the cleanest way possible, but it would be even better to not split it at all. But no other significant neighborhood, I think, is split very much. I think 500 West, maybe you could call that a split. I don't know. We discussed that last time, and people seem to think that was a pretty good dividing line. Okay, so we could talk about this more. Or we could quickly look at some of the other variations on this, just to give perspective.
Maybe let's look at the other variations on it, Kevin.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, so the next variation is one that I drew, starting with Sarah's. And okay, so this puts Thompson and Green River. You know, you can, most of the county is up here is of course unpopulated. You know, the bigger concentrations of people are in Thompson and the Green River distant suburbs. And those got grouped with this northern Spanish Valley district. If we wanted to, we could rearrange the lines to make this purple Eastern Spanish Valley district take in all of that. It wouldn't affect the population balance very much because so few people live in this area. So that's an option to keep in mind, is, you know, making this area purple rather than yellow. Okay, so the difference in this plan, what I started with Sarah's old one, which had kind of a more radical split of Holyoke Neighborhood, and Sarah added most of Holyoke to the district above, and I instead put it in the south so that the Holyoke neighborhood is getting grouped with other parts of Eastern Spanish Valley, and we're using Pat Creek as a boundary along here. But as a consequence, we can't use Pat Creek as a boundary along here, otherwise the population will be too large. So we had to add a lot of stuff to the blue district, and so the dividing line in Spanish Valley is a little, you know, maybe a little bit less logical than the map we were just looking at. It starts out at Pat Creek and then on Spanish Trail, goes up there and into Highway 191. If we were, this also, you know, because of the way the census blocks are, this actually splits Kayenta Heights into two parts, which I don't think makes any difference. And so if we were to adopt this map, I would say we should draw a line in here to sort of, you know, include Kayenta Heights in the blue district rather than the yellow-green district. That would have a relatively small effect on population balance. And another thing I'll remark on for this map, but it applies to quite a lot of them. Many maps use 200 North as a dividing line. But of course, there's people living on both sides of the street here. And I think in almost every map, we would do better to draw the line, you know, split the census block and draw the line basically at the all the properties that are accessed from 200 North would go to the district to the south and leave these others to the district to the north. And again, that would transfer some population from the yellow-green district into the blue-green district, but they're very close. So it's not.
That could be a decent number of people with Desert Rose apartments are over there, and there's.
Yeah, so we can look at the total population of this census block is 103. So that's the most we would be transferring, but people do live on 300 North and these other things. So it would be something less than 103, maybe 60 or 70. I don't know. Yeah, we should try to estimate it. But if we were to add 60 or 70 people to the blue-green district, then it would be about as large as this yellow district. You know, not extremely out of balance, but anyway, something to consider. So this is one variation, and then the other variant is the original version.
It's my opinion we should discard that one.
Okay.
But we could look at it.
Why don't we look at it quickly just to see how much your new version is improved.
Is that, Sarah, is that because of the way that Spanish Valley is broken up in that one, or?
I think I just, what did I change?
So the split
I
in
think it was
Holyoke,
the Holyoke neighborhood. So the variant, like I thought Holyoke Lane, you know how it goes down and curves across. It's a decent landmark to divide by, and so I just that was the main thing.
Yeah. But
then yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, I think that is the major difference. I don't notice anything different. Okay, I'm going to close these windows since Sarah doesn't like them. Okay, so those are these three maps. So I don't know. I mean, you know, we could have a long discussion about every map, or we could just focus we could take some kind of straw poll and focus on, I'm assuming everyone's had a chance to think about these maps, and we did discuss them at the last workshop. So I don't think we need to go over it all again. Does anyone else want to take a closer look at some of the other maps?
Wasn't the rural zones divided similar to the contiguous neighborhoods, just or was there different areas in the urban downtown zone?
It's got some, I think it has some changes in the urban downtown zone in addition to the outlying area. So let's take a closer look at, so this is Sarah's update to that. So, from a distance, you see that it does, Castle Valley and Thompson are now not in the same district. This one, similar to my plan, it puts all of Holyoke into the Eastern Spanish Valley District. So that's, my variation number 1 did the same thing. This district is the same. It just turns out to have, almost exactly the right population with these very natural census block lines, so that, we see that in a lot of the plans. And then.
Yeah, this one looks a lot like the one you just showed of yours, Kevin.
Yeah, so I guess Sarah and I independently came up with the same idea, with a few minor variations, but I think most of the variation is in the outlying part of the counties. So pretty, as Evan said, pretty similar. Let's see, so this one, let's see if this one's any different. I think I drew this one starting with Sarah's original. So, maintains a split of the outlying county into 3 different parts. But this one, actually, yeah, so this has kind of a funky split of Holyoke, and that may have been something that was present in the original that I didn't try to fix, but because it, the red district lost some population up there, allows us to, follow Pat Creek a little bit longer in Spanish Valley. So that's probably the main difference. So these are all similar. Maybe we should look at a dissimilar map.
I created a new one with clean boundaries that is dissimilar in that it splits Spanish Valley up differently and keeps Holyoke all in one, but I don't know if we want to add a whole other plan to this mix.
Okay, well, we can, after we're done with this one, we could take a look if you think it's worth looking at. So let me open this one in Districtor. Okay, so one thing that stands out is this crazy purple district, but that's actually not important at all. These census blocks are almost unpopulated, so that we could just as easily make that blue. So I think the thing to focus on is how it splits up. Downtown Moab and Spanish Valley. This area, sort of north of 400 North, in the other plans we've been looking at, gets grouped with the thing to the south, but this time it differently here. And then instead, the Mountain View area, which in other plans was grouped with the west of 500 West neighborhoods, where my cursor is, now gets grouped with these. So that's one difference. This does have a slight, like mini maps. This has kind of a funky split of the Holyoke neighborhood. It's kind of hard to avoid because a lot of people live in here. This is densely populated. So to balance population, you often have to draw lines through there. I mean, this, if we like the general shape of this, some of those things could be improved. It does put all the outlying areas in the same district. So I think in grouping these areas a little bit differently, my recollection is Carter was trying to balance, on the one hand, drawing what we're calling clean boundaries, or boundaries that seem to make sense on the ground, but also taking income into account and which areas are grouped together. Um, so let's try some straw polls. Who has us, and you can just decide not to vote. You know, will either be, like yes, no, or neutral. Who feels strongly that the outlying part, like, Thompson and Castle Valley should be in different districts? Or, that's worth trying for.
I kind of like that idea. I think I'm into that. Not strongly, but
That's one.
I like the idea. I will state, I do go to Thompson a lot. I was just in Thompson this afternoon. I don't go to Castle Valley a lot, but that might not be the case if they felt that they had a representative, that was a little more just receptive to their needs. And I'm not saying I'm not, I don't do a lot in Castle Valley. They're pretty independent.
Yeah, and part of that is, of course, they're incorporated, so they control their own planning and zoning.
Right.
There's
Right.
less need. From the
Right.
county.
Right. Yeah. So, but I do think it's an interesting idea.
Okay, so some yeses, weak yeses. I may be very slightly in favor of it, but it's not, it's very far from a deal breaker to me. I could happily, so a weak favor. Anyone who thinks it's a bad idea, or it's better to put all the outlying areas together because they share their outlyingness together as some kind of community of interest?
I will say, in the sake of the straw poll, I'm pretty neutral, but I know that there have been times when there's been like a strong kind of quote unquote rural voice on the commission. And so if those outlying areas are kind of separated and then we get kind of downtown reps representing Castle Valley or Thompson, I don't want that voice to be lost, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think I have heard some people in Castle Valley. This may have been at one of the public information meetings we had within the past few weeks. I think it was Dave Early saying that, they really wish Castle Valley could be a district by itself because it's so different from other parts of the county. But of course, it can't because the population isn't nearly large enough. But they thought it might make more sense for them to be grouped with the more rural parts of Southern Spanish Valley, as they are right now. So I think that's agreeing with what Evan said. Though there is the important difference that Castle Valley, unlike Southern Spanish Valley, it's incorporated. So, if someone lives in Castle Valley, they're not affected by Grand County planning and zoning.
I think I tend to put myself in the boat of one of these big blue districts that covers all of the outlying areas.
Okay.
Yeah, to me, that just feels, it just feels a lot cleaner to have one representative for that whole area rather. Yeah, I guess, I don't know. It's the reasoning, I guess, isn't that complex other than, when I look at one of those yellow divided rural zones divided plants and seeing sort of the in Moab area, also covering for the Green River area, for example. For me, that just doesn't follow the same logic as Green River, Thompson, and Castle Valley and Eastern Spanish Valley being grouped. I don't necessarily feel. I don't know how strongly I feel in that way, but I would say I'm definitely leaning more in that direction.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a diversity of opinion on that question. And one thing we might do is at this workshop, kind of settle on one plan that keeps all those areas together and another plan that breaks them apart, and then we can make the final decision next week. And so another issue, the one question is, how should Spanish Valley outside of the city limits is about, it's more more than 40% of the county, at least in terms of registered voters. So it would be very logical to have two districts, that are composed mostly of unincorporated Spanish Valley. And then the question is, do you divide it with into northern and southern parts, or do you divide it like along Pat Creek or Spanish Valley Drive, or Murphy or something, into east and west? And so most of these plans choose east and west. I live in Spanish Valley, and that makes sense to me. But does anyone feel like we really should look into doing it along a north-south line instead?
No, I think east-west makes the most sense, Kevin.
Okay. Anyone object to sticking with, which is what most of these plans do? So. Okay, so the two of us who live in Spanish Valley endorse that idea. Okay, and then I think the only other thing, the big issue that I pick up looking at these maps, and let me bring, I think this is Sarah's map again. Oops. So the Holyoke area, it's on the one hand, it's not incorporated. It's outside of the city limits, but on the other hand, it's pretty dense. It doesn't really feel like it's Spanish Valley. So it's this kind of in-between area that could logically be grouped with the areas to the north, or it could logically be grouped with the areas to the south. I think the arguments are kind of equal. And so these maps, where they differ the most is what they do with the Holyoke neighborhood. Do they group it with Eastern Spanish Valley? Do they group it with, this area to the north of it? Or do they kind of split it? So lost track of which, I guess this is one of the rural zones divided maps. Okay, so this map puts all of Holyoke to the south, but there are other maps. Let's see if I can bring one up. Kind of losing track of my tabs here. Okay, this might be it. I think this is Sarah's. So this is a plan that does have everything, all the outlying areas in the same district. But I think one consequence of that is that it does have to split Holyoke to some extent. And I think Sarah sort of deliberately chose the busiest streets, what eastern part of Holyoke and Sage, where most of the traffic is. And then we've got some other plans, maybe not as refined, that, choose different dividing lines. They could perhaps be massaged to do a split more like this, or not split it at all.
Go ahead, Kevin.
No, you go ahead.
I guess, and this is just like a perception, I just don't consider that neighborhood Spanish Valley, right? To me, it feels like they would have more in common with that northeastern portion of the county. That's just my opinion.
Okay.
I agree with Trish on that. That's the feeling in that neighborhood. It seems like it's more like town.
But I do think
one of my thoughts with that was, especially with the new USU campus and that cross section right there, and this whole along Mill Creek, that whole section is kind of commercial. I just see that as being this new, kind of like a new zone that's being developed, and it seems distinct from other places along Mill Creek Drive. But I understand also what you were saying about it not quite fitting in with Spanish Valley. I think also with Arroyo Crossing, like there's this new kind of like middle section of Spanish Valley that feels pretty different to me from the more rural areas.
Yeah, I do think that one very important thing that the Holyoke neighborhood does share with places further south in Spanish Valley is that it's unincorporated. And so that means that they, unlike, all the areas to the north, they're affected by planning and zoning decisions that the Grand County Commission makes. And so, we've had a situation in the past, which I've sometimes complained about, where the very large majority of county commissioners and planning commissioners live in either incorporated Moab or incorporated Castle Valley. And then they're making decisions for, you know, a large chunk of people who just don't have proportional representation on there. So I think there is something to that, but I certainly, that's not the only consideration. I just think it's belongs up there with the, you know, the thing that Trish and others expressed, that Holyoke Lane kind of feels like it's not really the same as the areas that are much further south.
So quick question there. I mean, I agree with that, Kevin, that could be a problem to not have rural areas represented. And so last night I was playing around with a map with the idea that, well, so you think that if there's one zone that's entirely representative of that rural area, they're destined to have at least one vote on a council. But say that area was say there was like 3 different zones that were splitting the area and had parts of Moab and also the rural area, then at least you could have the chance of having 3 commissioners that represented the rural area instead of just one. But do you think that, I mean, I'm just wondering what you think about that. Like, would that just not be likely? And then
I guess I'd want to look at how the population is distributed within each of those districts. And of course, you know, people don't only vote on P and Z issues, that, you know, they vote for lots of other reasons as well. So, you know, that would definitely muddy the picture. But I think it is true that people, and, you know, for whatever reason, historically, people living in the unincorporated part of Spanish Valley have been underrepresented on the Grand County Council and Commission. And the usual way that one responds to a situation like that is to not split those people up in redistricting maps. So I think that almost every map has 2 districts that are dominated by unincorporated Spanish Valley. You know, this map does. You know, most of the population is in, you know, this area and this area. And so I think, you know, inevitably there's going to be more representation of Spanish Valley than there has been in the past, I think.
that makes sense. I was just posing the question. So, because I'm actually not that familiar with how the zones are right now. Like how is Spanish Valley split up? I know that it's my district and it kind of jumps across.
Oh, you mean like the current district map?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me try to see if I can pull that up.
I know there's at least 2 different districts in Spanish Valley.
Yeah, just while you're trying to find that and pull it up, to the question of whether it should be lumped in with the rest of Spanish Valley or in that more incorporated area, I can definitely see what Trish is saying and others, that it kind of has more of that town feel to it. But I think Kevin brings up a really good point about the unincorporated zone. And I would kind of lean towards having them in with the other unincorporated areas. But I think it's more important to try to get that neighborhood together in a logical way, whether it's with that northern section or southern section.
Okay, well, maybe we can relook at some of these maps with that in mind. So currently the districts are these 5 colors here, and notice that there is an Eastern Spanish Valley district, but it's got this disconnected piece up here. And I think more often than not, the person representing these areas actually lives up here. This would never survive a court challenge. I think one of the very basic redistricting principles is you don't have disconnected districts the way this green one is. But Grand County did it 30 years ago, and no one ever complained, and here we are. But I think this together with the fact that all the population growth, or most of the population growth, occurred here, is what accounts for the lack of representation today. Okay.
So Evan, did you just say that you You like the Holyoke neighborhood being clumped more with Moab City?
I think that I was saying that I actually I like the idea of having them in with unincorporated
Okay.
section. But if finessing that, I think it's more important to finesse the line so that the neighborhood is in the same section or same district, and without having the kind of satellite overlay, it's hard for me to picture kind of where the houses are on that. I can appreciate what you're saying about that zone is going to change, and there's going to be a different character there with the university coming online in the future. And but it's just kind of hard for me to picture how that would affect where those lines are right now, and kind of how that would sorry, I'm talking in circles. My main priority would be to get the neighborhood together in one thing. And then if that was easy to do, my second thing would be to lump them into the unincorporated, because with that idea is I actually feel like they have more in common with dealing with the planning and zoning, et cetera, than the folks that live in the city boundaries, especially with those changes that might be coming to that area on
Yeah.
191.
So one thing that's worth keeping in mind is if you look at numbers of registered voters, the registered voters, which is not exactly the same thing as census population, but hopefully not too far apart. About a little bit less than 45% of the county lives in unincorporated areas. Two districts, which should be about 40% of the county. So inevitably, we're going to have some unincorporated people lumped with, downtown Moab, or at least Castle Valley or something like that. I mean, that's just unavoidable. And then if we group Castle Valley, which has a significant number of people, with parts of Spanish Valley, that makes the problem even worse, because then the population goes up to maybe 48% of the county, and you can't. So there's going to have to be some significant number of people living in the unincorporated Spanish Valley plus Castle Valley who get grouped with parts of Moab City. So we're not going to be able to achieve perfection. If we can achieve perfection just in the Holyoke neighborhood, but there's going to be consequences elsewhere in the map to keep the population roughly in balance. So we could quickly relook at some of the maps with that in mind. So this is the Sarah's current preferred contiguous neighborhoods plan.
Kevin, I'm just going to jump in real quick. Hey, Mallory, I know you're muted, but we're getting some kind of feedback or interference from your line. I'm not sure how that's happening, but just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Sorry to interrupt.
Thanks, Gabe. So this does split Holyoke, not as badly as some of the plans, but a little bit. So with most of it going to the north, but some of it going to the south. Zooming out, all the rest of this red area is unincorporated, and this blue area is unincorporated except for Castle Valley. This plan, this is my take on the contiguous neighborhoods plan. For some reason, it's not coming up. So first looking at the Holyoke neighborhood, it's all kept together and it's grouped to the south. But as a result, we have some kind of funky boundaries elsewhere in Spanish Valley to keep the population balance. It doesn't make quite as much sense. So, what we're gaining in Holyoke, we're losing in Spanish Valley in terms of coherence or logical lines.
What is that boundary? Is that like Shumway Lane between blue and green? Or the gray and green?
This is Murphy and this is Shumway. You're right.
Yes, that's decent.
I
Yeah,
mean,
so
in some ways, this kind
one
of
thing that's one thing that is weird about this map, which I drew, is you've got this district which is dominated by kind of downtown Moab stuff, but it reaches way out on Murphy Lane, pretty far. So that's I think if I were my biggest complaint about this district is that it's really breaking Spanish Valley. In particular, Murphy Lane is getting grouped rather illogically, but that's what I had to do because this map was the very first thing I did is I put all of Holyoke into one area. And this is the best I could come up with. So I think there's trade-offs. And if we insist on having Holyoke not split, then we're going to have some kind of split somewhere else. And here we've got it, relatively mild in Spanish Valley, but that's something I think is a bit worse in going pretty far out in Murphy Lane and grouping that with this kind of downtown Moab area, which goes all the way up here to the north. Next.
Yeah, with those trade-offs, I might go for just the contiguous neighborhood plan.
The first one, okay. Let's look at how this. I'm skipping Sarah's original one because she doesn't think it's better than the later versions. Okay, so this one has kind of a wacky split of Holyoke, and I don't know if that was deliberate based on income things or it's just trying to achieve population balance. I imagine there's some kind of income-based rationale for why Carter drew this, because I think he was, other things being equal, trying to draw lines, like we have up here. So I think there's some rationale for this squirrely line here in terms of keeping similar income groups together, but I don't know exactly what it is. So this map, I think, does do a number of, I don't know. I think, this map is paying a pretty big price in terms of neighborhoods and geographical cleanness, because it was trying to meet some other goals.
Kevin, right before after we settle on like two options, I think we should pull up the demographic information and just see how that lies. Like when I was playing around with it, it seemed difficult to make a predominantly low income district or even do it by race, but I think we should still look at those numbers.
Okay, yeah, maybe we can on a next pass through look at those numbers. Continuing with this Holyoke point of view, rural zones divided, version 0. So this keeps all of Holyoke together. It does have this thing of taking, the same thing that I did, even though Sarah drew this map. A lot of Murphy Lane going, pretty far out is grouped with downtown Moab and, Nob Hill and things like that. So that's, I think we're paying a price, and this green district is a real hodgepodge. And again, that's the price we're paying for not drawing a line through the Holyoke neighborhood. So that's similar to a map we've already looked at.
I don't know. There's something I kind of like about that one. I see what you're saying about the hodgepodge, especially getting into, I guess I'm less concerned with like the 400 East and the Mill Creek Drive, Tusher Walker being lumped in with Murphy Lane as I am is like getting further. It seems to start getting a little bit ridiculous, getting like closer to sort of North Moab. And also I do think that the less clean division out in Spanish Valley, with the cutover at Spanish Trail Drive. I don't know if Trish wants, I would appreciate, if there was any sort of input Trish had on sort of if that sort of carries any logic kind of sort of opening up the Spanish Valley, the sort of the South Spanish Valley district at Spanish Trail. I don't know, for some reason in my head that seems to almost make some kind of sense.
While we're waiting for Tricia to chime in, I mean, I also live in this area. Yeah, this line right here, it's not the worst line in the world, I think. I mean, this is sort of Old City Park right here, and then it kind of looks like it goes over the Shumway. So, so if I were to argue against this map, which of course is very similar to a map that I actually drew, but my argument would be this yellow-green district is pretty crazy. Going from these kind of northern areas all the way down to Murphy. It just seems like a mishmash. And just having this kind of three-way split into this area along Murphy Lane, which to me, I drive. This is how I drive to town every day. It feels like one kind of cohesive thing, but it's being split between three districts. So. But I agree with Gabe's original point that this part of the dividing, it's not ideal, but it's not terrible either.
Yeah, and I guess when you put it that way, in terms of like the three, just like dividing up such a small section into three, I can see how that is pretty problematic.
Okay, so another take. I think this map is similar to one we've already looked at. Okay, so this doesn't do a good job of dividing Holyoke up. That's kind of not ideal. But I think everything else is pretty good. So the price, the benefit you get from making this bad cut is that I don't think there are any other. Well, maybe. Yeah, so grouping this part of Holyoke with these areas, isn't good, but that's already covered there. So this has a bad Holyoke split, but no other bad splits, I think. Courtney Kaiser's plan. So she chose north-south dividing lines. So we've got southern Spanish Valley plus all the outlying areas. And we've got Spanish Trail. One could play around with these lines, of course. It looks like Holyoke is kept together in this plan. This northern, the yellow district to me seems pretty diverse. I mean, it's reaching up into, I don't know, maybe there's not a lot of population here. Seems to be doing a lot, and again, this blue-green district is kind of sprawling, I think. So this doesn't break Holyoke up, but I think it does lots of other less than ideal things.
Does this carry a good population balance, this one?
Let's check. No, it doesn't. So maybe some of those things could be cleaned up. So usually we want this number to be less than 5. If it's less than 5, we have nothing to worry about. If it gets to be a little above 5, then we sort of need to provide some justification for why we're deviating that much from the ideal population balance. So this deviates more than most of the maps we've looked at, but it could perhaps be repaired if we otherwise like it. But I think our consensus was we didn't like the north-south split in Spanish Valley, so that's a reason not to choose this one.
I think we're trying to also, reading the words that are on that map, like keeping rural character clumped together and not dividing the neighborhood votes. I think that we're attempting to do those things in other maps, so I'm okay with letting go of this map.
Okay. And then a map we haven't really looked at yet. This is one that I drew, and I started. I guess basically I started with the Holyoke neighborhood, roughly, approximate city limits, and then just went south with an east-west split. and then tried to equalize the population. So I was using Spanish Valley Drive as a split, which is not as good as Pat Creek. I think I just hadn't thought of using Pat Creek when I drew this map. This does keep all of Holyoke together, because it's actually started drawing the map exactly in Holyoke. This I think another thing I tried to do is not throw Castle Valley into the Spanish Valley districts, because Castle Valley is incorporated and Spanish Valley isn't. So I thought I'd give that a try. But as a result, we have to go a lot further up into this area. So we get some pretty squirrely boundaries around here. Again, a sort of at least a 2, if not a 3-way split in an area that feels like it should be all part of one district. And again, this was an early attempt, so the boundaries up here aren't as nice. So that's most of the maps we've looked at. And so I think my conclusion is that yes, it is possible to keep all of Holyoke together, but you're going to pay a price somewhere else. Did we want to look at demographic information?
But kind of what you were going for here is kind of more like what you were saying with, if 48% of the voters are outside the incorporated area, here they would kind of get 3 districts out of that.
No, they would get 2, I think. They would get these 2, the blue and the yellow, but this pink district, most of the population's in your neighborhood, Evan. So
Okay, yeah.
it does include Castle Valley, but and Thompson, but not very many people live in Thompson.
Let's not forget Castleton.
And Castle, I tend to lump Castleton and Castle Valley together. Is that a big faux pas? Am I going to make enemies by saying that I think of those as being the same area? Okay. So let's see. So I will admit I've not spent a lot of time looking at demographic information. So
Which one is this that we're looking at?
I've lost track. Let me close a bunch of tabs so we're clear on which ones we're looking at. Should close that one.
Well,
Yeah, I wish in District R it said what map you were looking at.
Yeah, no, that disconnect. Yeah, maybe 10 years from now when they do it again, they can improve that. So, okay, I think this is the first of the draft plans. So let's look at it in District R, as younger people seem to say. And data layers, evaluation, voting age, population by race. We're not a very racially diverse county, so there's every district is majority white, and I think it's pretty much impossible not to draw a map that does that. I think when Carter was drawing maps, he had some additional data layers which aren't available with this tool, that he was also looking at income, or he may have just been looking, he knows where the subsidized housing places are, and he was perhaps trying to get as many of those as possible into the same district. But I don't think we're going to be able to have like a chart that compares them all. Also, as worth keeping in mind, I keep harping on this. My friends at the Multicultural Center tell me, if I understand them correctly, that most of the Hispanic population are not citizens, so they're not going to be affecting outcomes of elections, at least not directly by voting. So that's something else to keep in mind. Also related to that is, if we were to get districts that were perfectly balanced in terms of census population, they would still be off by, plus, by 20% from highest to lowest in terms of registered voters. Some, census population includes children who can't vote, includes non-citizens, they can't vote. It includes demographics that just tend not to register as much. So one could say that, make an argument that it makes sense to have the same number of registered voters in each district, or at least voting eligible people in each district, rather than census population, which includes children and prisoners and non-citizens and things like that. And so I think one could argue for either one of those, but I think the big takeaway is all of those population balance measures are imperfect, and so we shouldn't get hung up on getting it precisely equal. I think this group, I think in our discussions we haven't, but watching the state draw maps, often it seemed like they were throwing everything else to win just to try to get their population deviation to below 1%, which seemed really crazy to me. So, okay, I am done ranting about that. I had to get it off my chest. So I don't know, is it worth looking at these for each district? To me, it doesn't seem that interesting, but we could look at more if people want to.
I was just thinking if one stood out as creating like more of a majority of the Hispanic population, like I've seen a map with 20%, but
Okay,
that
so
doesn't necessarily, I mean, like Carter was saying, you're required to create a majority district if you can, but we can't create a majority district. So I'm wondering if there's somewhere in between.
Yeah.
We should
Okay, so
aim.
this one has the biggest is 16%. We could look at Carter's map next. And evaluation. So 18 versus what was it, 16 on the other one? So we could pick another map at random just for another data point.
What about one of the rural zones divided?
Okay, let's do one of those. Almost 17. So to me, it looks like there's not a lot of deviation by that measure.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we try to make some tentative decisions? At least narrow the field.
Yeah, I think we could narrow the field.
What's your goal, Kevin, to get down to like 2 or 3?
Yeah, I would say at most 2 or 3. We could even. That's probably good, but if we got down to 1, I think that's fine too. If there were a clear favorite, maybe there isn't going to be. I think the trade-offs is going to be hard to decide on a favorite map.
I'll start. I like the contiguous neighborhood plan and the rural zones divided plan. Those are probably my top 2. And there's probably an easy hybrid between them if there was interest in the rural zones divided.
Okay, and you like the Sarah's current versions rather than the variants?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I think that some of these points we brought up about, I don't know if corrections almost sounds too harsh a word, but nudging some of the things we've talked about tonight.
Okay. Anyone else?
I would agree of taking one of each of those. I mean, I also.
Well, we're waiting for Trish. I like the contiguous neighborhoods plan, and perhaps the variant 1 even better, but one of those 2.
Okay. Trish, you were saying?
Sorry, I'm on my phone. My laptop is not cooperating with me. I like one of the contiguous neighborhoods also. I would also take one of the rural zones divided. And Kevin, I like that one that you developed, the predominantly pink one. I don't know if we want to just throw that into there. And I understand that we're going to kind of manipulate them once we get down to the nitty gritty, but that's just my opinion and you guys can throw that out. But I think it'd be great to have a couple that we can eventually manipulate.
Okay,
I'd make the argument for the rural zones divided variant 1 because it doesn't create that weird district that's sprawling from Knob Hill or whatever down to Murphy Lane.
so let's make sure. I can't remember all the differences.
I know I haven't.
Okay.
I can't either. I just think if we took kind of the general concept, I guess is my thought, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then,
I like this one better than the rural zones divided non-variant because
Okay.
even though it's got that weird bulb in the Holyoke lane, I think it solves the problem of that other district a little
Okay.
bit better.
okay.
Yeah.
But I think I'm more supportive of the contiguous neighborhoods because I think that the Holyoke neighborhood is more elegantly split.
Of those,
Okay.
Sarah, which ones of the contiguous neighborhoods, which ones? I mean, there's 3 of them. So
I think she was referring
I
to
think that
the
one.
first one. Okay, good.
But it's
got
hard
it.
to remember also. I think that one, I mean, I'd be happy to also throw Thompson into whatever district. It seems like it doesn't really skew it that much.
Yeah, which is sort of one of the differences between these two is that it just throws Thompson into the yellow district.
Let's
Okay,
see.
anyway, anyone who wants to say something who hasn't yet? I will say, I think both of these are good plans. I think I'm having trouble deciding, but I think this one's pretty good. I think of these, I might like, my version a little bit better than Sarah's version, though they are of course very similar. I don't like this one as much. I think it's got other issues. If there are aspects of it we liked, we could work hard on it, but I'm not as big a fan of this plan, even though I did draw it.
Okay.
So it sounds like contiguous neighborhood plan and maybe rural zones divided plan variant 1. It
Okay,
seems like
so
That
let's,
sounds
so
those feel like finalists.
maybe what we can do next is just talk about, if there's any tweaks or combinations, choose our best version of the contiguous neighborhoods plan, and then also one of these. And then we'll have basically 2 finalists, and then we'll make a final decision next week. So again, to review, we might just want to go with this one exactly as is, or is as close as we can come with census blocks. Yeah, so I think this one, the only quibble one could make is this, the way that Holyoke's divided. Everything else I think is just very, very good. If we did go with this one, I would advocate for adding the north part of 200 North here, sacrificing a little bit of population balance or something that makes more sense. We can't draw the map that way because the tool doesn't allow us to split the census block. But I think we would still be close enough in population if we did that. And I don't really see anywhere else that I think, this yellow sprawling district, the population here is 0, so we might want to change the boundaries of the yellow district to make it look less crazy in a way that has 0 effect on population. So do those sound good to people? And then this will be one of the finalists with those potential
Aye.
changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would ask the question about with that technique of adding the people from the other side of the street into the district,
Mhm.
would it be worth doing something similar at that Holyoke interface?
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. The Holyoke, you could do everything south of Holyoke. So even on the west side.
Oh, is it, so you like cut it right there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's just that weird nightly rental right there. I don't know if there's many
Yeah, there
houses.
probably aren't a whole lot of people who live there, so one could certainly do that, and it'll be easy, maybe easier to describe what the district boundaries are.
But with the, where the purple meets the green, just right of your pointer, are there houses along that street? That's what I was having.
Yeah,
a
and
hard-
there's even here, if I zoom in enough, there's some cul-de-sacs.
Mhm.
So it's not, it'd be one thing if we could just take all the houses that are right on the street, but
But then-
and it gets to be
yeah.
quite a few people.
How
Okay.
many people, if we added that to the green in consideration of purple potentially having the most population growth in the next 10 years, how would that look?
Okay.
It's hundreds.
Is it
Well,
hundreds?
Check it out.
Okay, so right now, purple is, by design, it's got kind of a low population. And lime green is kind of right at the ideal point. And so if we could make purple even lower, which would probably, put us beyond the 5%, but it's, I think, a justifiable one. Yeah, so that's certainly something that could be considered.
Kevin, if you put your put it on that little magnifying glass, yeah, you can see how big. So just that block is 117 people. It's starts skewing the numbers quite a lot.
Yeah.
And when Arroyo Crossing comes online, that's going to add another, what, 300 to 500 people maybe?
Yeah, I think it's 300 units.
So potentially
I mean, I don't know
600.
how fast they're all going to get built, but some of them are being built right now. So
And then also Peak View, I think, is in the pink.
Right. Right.
yeah, so I mean,
It seems like pink has potential to grow the most by far of any of the districts.
okay, so maybe that's something, since it's getting a little bit, we could have that discussion next week. But basically, solve the Holyoke problem by making the pink population pretty low, but then just note that we've got these big housing projects that are online in the pink district, and so that's why we think it's okay. I think that's probably legally defensible, but it's not as defensible as just being within this plus or minus 5%, in which case the courts will just defer to you and they won't even really consider a challenge based on population balance. Okay. So can someone, I think I'm remembering everything we're doing here, but if someone wants to send me an email with the discussion, we just, potential changes on this map, that might be helpful. So the ones I'm remembering is, 200 North area. Maybe play with the boundaries of the yellow district in ways that don't affect population. And there's the option of avoiding splitting Holyoke and just having this district have, a lower population.
Yeah, I'll send you that email.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, so then the other, I think the map that got maybe the most
Yep.
things was this one. So let's see what we don't like about this map. Yeah, so it's got a whole, it's certainly a less than ideal Holyoke split. So we would definitely, I think, want to fix that. We could play around to see how much, and I think this one, unlike Sarah's, the pink population is probably already pretty high. Let me open up in Districtor. Yeah, so this has actually, a rather small, so I did the thing that I've been criticizing other people for, and I got carried away making the population balance really low, even though I think that's kind of fundamentally stupid because populations are going to change, and census population is not the same as voting age population or voting eligible population. So we could start subtracting from pink and see how out of balance that makes things. And we could maybe add this one back in. I don't know that that'll make much difference. I don't know. So it does. And then I guess we could give some of this stuff to the Blue District. So Powerhouse Lane would be part of that might balance things out a bit. And then we can give Pink back some stuff here. Oh, that was way too much. Something like that. I mean, I'm gonna play with it. So now that's a pretty, it's not great. Do we want to look at other variations of rule zones divided? Or, it could be a homework problem for, me and Sarah and anyone else who enjoys maps to try to fiddle with this to make it a little bit better.
Well, what is it that we like about this that isn't in the contiguous neighborhoods? Is it just the split where Thompson isn't?
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. In which case we could also look at this map, which is based on contiguous neighborhoods, but does Thompson differently.
This one has the squirrely Murphy Lane downtown zone, but could be altered.
Possibly could, but at some point we've got to make a decision. So
I mean, I drafted the contiguous map, and I played a lot with how to move populations around with the Holyoke, and I just think a split is going to be okay because we have to split things every once in a while.
okay. Well, why don't we? I think let's carry forward 2 maps and let's make it. This one, contiguous neighborhoods, with the small modifications we discussed, and something like this one. But we could look at some variations there. But I kind of agree. Looking at the maps now, I sort of like this one best. And I guess we could try to modify it just to put Thompson in a different district than Castle Valley if we thought that was important. Is that?
I'm good with that.
Are we good with that?
Yeah.
Sounds great. Yep.
Okay, so I would characterize this. It seems like this map's getting the most support, but we've got a runner-up, which is maybe this map or something similar to it. And we'll decide next week.
Perfect.
That sounds
All right.
great.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin and Sarah in particular for all of your map making. And Kevin, I'll send you that email that was just with the reminder of some of those things we were going to look at fiddling at. And yeah, it's 7:18, and I'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thanks.